What if everything you believed about your enemies, about war, power, and pride, was shattered the moment they showed you kindness instead of conquest? In a galaxy where surrender meant death, one unexpected gesture changed the fate of an entire world. This is not just a story of war, it's a story of awakening. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show some love by giving this video a thumbs up. Now, let's jump into the story. Ocean Vel stood on the balcony of the Skyport control tower and watched empty docks drift by beneath the clouds. Only 6 months earlier, every berth had held a gleaming warship, their hulls reflecting the red dawn light like polished stone. Now the metal slips were hollow and silent, as if someone had taken a bite out of the skyline. A chill breeze curled around him, tugging at his coat. Below, the streets of Solmir carried on with forced calm, but Ashen sensed the change in the air, the way sailors sense a coming storm. Whenever a cargo shuttle did appear, it came in slow and wounded, engines stuttering, paint scorched by weapon. Fire. Each one told the same story without words. The front line was collapsing. For most of Naraya's citizens, the war with the humans had always felt like a distant rumor. Battles happened on moons they would never visit. Casualty lists scrolled across public screens, but the names were only strings of letters, someone else's cousins, someone else's friends. Yet every cycle, the lists grew longer, and the markets grew thinner. Trader Navi, who once imported sweet grain from 10 worlds, now had only 3 dusty crates to his name. He tried to laugh it off, telling jokes about government tariffs, but his eyes were rimmed with fear. Fear had become a fog everyone breathed. Elder Corvain, the oldest member of the High Council, still gave daily speeches in the Marble Plaza. His voice, once bright as a ceremonial bell, had grown hoarse. "Hold faith," he told the crowds. "Our fleets are mighty, our spirit unbroken." Children repeated his slogans in schoolyards, unaware that their teachers erased lessons about victory and replaced them with lessons about endurance. Even Ashen, who wore medals for campaigns fought before those children were born, felt a tremor in his bones that had nothing to do with age. One gray evening, a coded summons reached him. The message was short: report to the Citadel at once. No insignia, no farewell. Ashen slid a finger across the small glass token that opened the tower's lift and descended into the Undercity. Neon lights flickered overhead, reflecting off puddles left by a recent rainstorm. Vendors had packed up early. Laughter had fled the alleyways. Every step echoed dot inside the Citadel war chamber. 12 officials sat around a long stone table. The colors of their uniforms had faded from years of wear. Deep greens dulled to moss, brilliant blues dimmed to ash. Ashen saluted, but no one returned the gesture. Elder Corvin's gaunt face was even paler beneath the brass glow of wall lanterns. "Commander," he said, voice brittle, "please sit." Ashen obeyed. Heart-thumping data holomap shimmered over the table, showing cluster after cluster of distant stars. Red icons pulsed where Narayan fleets once held ground. Now those icons winked out in slow sequence, like embers in cooling ash. "These are our final positions," Officer Talry explained. "This morning we lost Orion Gate, yesterday Relic. Pass." One by one systems fell. Ashen stared at the shrinking perimeter until his eyes blurred. Something heavy settled behind his ribs, like a hand pressing down dot, and then Corvain said the words that stole the room's breath. "It is time to surrender." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Ashen thought he must have misheard. Surrender was a word taught only in the study of foreign history, never in Naraya's own. The silence broke when a junior strategist slammed her fist on the table. "We fight, or we die," she spat. "We cannot yield to the humans." Her voice shook with rage, but Corvain did not flinch. "We can no longer protect our people," he said, lifting trembling hands. "If the war continues, there will be no Naraya left to save." The debate raged, but no answer changed the hollow mathematics of defeat. Resources gone, allies scattered, fleets shattered. In the end, the council voted. 6 for surrender, 4 against, 2 abstained. Oshin's throat felt raw when he finally whispered his own vote. Abstain. He could not call for more blood, yet he could not sign away their pride. The meeting ended with instructions. The proclamation would go out at dawn across every channel. No time for rumors to twist the news. Oshin emerged from the citadel into the first pale light of morning. Somer's towers sliced the sky like quiet monuments. He walked with leaden feet through avenues lined by closed shops, past murals painted in bright hopes, now faded. A baker, setting up her stall, asked why he looked ill. Ajin almost told her the truth, but his voice failed. He kept walking. When the official notice finally thundered from rooftop loudspeakers, the city froze. The words echoed down every corridor. A unanimous decree of the High Council. Naraya will cease hostilities and seek peace with human command. Some citizens claimed the message was enemy propaganda. Others smashed their communits, refusing to hear it twice. In the public garden, a child asked his father if peace meant everyone could come home now, but the father could not answer. Through the day, Oshin watched tension unravel into disbelief. Storefronts stayed shuttered. Trams ran empty. Workers abandoned factories and gathered in silent knots, staring at nothing. A medic wept in the middle of an intersection until strangers guided her to a bench. Grief, confusion, and a quiet terror spread like cracks in glass. Yet above all, a question lingered in every eye. What comes after surrender? Night fell, but no one slept. Some citizens attended impromptu vigils beside the river, laying candles on the dark water. Others strode aimlessly through torchlit parks, muttering calculations of fleet sizes and weapon counts, trying to prove the announcement a mistake. Oshin stood on a bridge that overlooked Central Avenue. The neon had gone out there too, leaving only moonlight. He listened to wind hiss through empty spaces where laughter once lived. In that hush, he realized just how loud certainty had been, how it had filled their ears so completely they never heard the warning whispers. When dawn broke for the second time, orange light spilled over a city caught between yesterday's pride and tomorrow's unknown. Oshin Vel, once so sure of victory, felt like a soldier in a story ending before its final chapter. He understood there would be no triumphant return, no medals, no songs. Yet beneath his fear flickered something unexpected, a slim, stubborn spark of curiosity. If war was not the only shape the future could take, then what shape awaited them now? The sky answered with a low, distant rumble, a sound like engines beyond sight, approaching. And as every ear tilted upward, Naraya held its breath, suspended on the edge of whatever came next. Valenthay stood at the edge of the school roof and watched rain slip down the glass of the empty skylights. The outer district of Solmir felt muted, as if sound itself had packed its bags and left. Storefront signs no longer blinked. Street vendors no longer sang. Valen had lived through power failures before, but this silence was different. It carried the taste of surrender, dry, bitter, and impossible to swallow. He tightened his coat and listened for voices in the courtyards. Below, there were none. Even the children had stopped playing Got the Morning Bell, rang out of habit, not purpose. 5 students showed up for class, where 30 once filled every seat. Young Lyre, thin as a reed and bright as dawn, sat in the front row hugging an old data slate. The screen was cracked, but he held it like treasure. Valen forced a smile, wiped chalk dust from the board, and began a lesson on ancient philosophies of peace. Halfway through, his hand slowed. The word peace felt too heavy to finish. The children watched him, eyes wide, waiting for guidance he did not know how to give. An hour later, a new broadcast spilled from every speaker in the city. The official decree repeated itself, each syllable sharp as stone. Naraya had formally surrendered, and human fleet commanders would arrive tomorrow to oversee the transition. Valen stopped mid-sentence. Liar's slate slid from his grasp, clattering to the floor. Outside, citizens poured into streets that smelled of wet concrete and shock. Some knelt. Others shook their fists at the cold sky. The sound rose like wind. Through broken windows, a single question howled by thousands of voices. Why? Sister Menza, a local healer known for her fierce spirit, stood in the center of the plaza holding a handwritten banner that read, "Stand tall." Rain washed the ink into dark tears, but she would not let go. A few neighbors joined, eyes burning with grief and pride. Valen watched from the school gate, torn between the safety of his students and the pull of shared protest. Soldiers in gray cloaks soon formed a line across the square. They did not raise guns, but their presence was warning enough. Sister Menza's chant faltered, then died as the banner slipped from her fingers onto the wet stone. Back in the classroom, Liar asked the question Valen had dreaded all day. "Teacher, what happens to us now?" Valen opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. History books spoke of victory, of heroes returning on shining transports. They did not speak of teachers explaining to children why their flags must be folded away. At last he said, "It is hard to see the shape of tomorrow. But we are still here, and being here means we can still choose kindness." The words sounded weak even to him, yet Liar nodded as if receiving solid gold. Evening brought low clouds that pressed against rooftops. The neighborhood lights flickered as power grids struggled under the strain of endless news reports. Valen left the school, guiding Liar and the other children home through narrow lanes. Parents thanked him with quiet voices, afraid to speak too loudly in case Hope was listening, and decided to flee. Once alone, Valen wandered aimlessly past shuttered cafes and dark apartment blocks. At a corner, he found Sister Menza washing rainwater from her hands. Her banner lay beside her, ruined. "They will knock soon," she whispered. Valen asked, "And if they do?" She shrugged, eyes hollow. "Then we answer with grace, or we answer with fire. I no longer know which is right." Late that night, everyone who owned a radio kept it on lowest volume. Static cracked, then cleared for fragments of rumor. A human medical corps had tended. Wounded Norayans on a captured moon. Another report claimed entire towns had vanished under occupation. No one knew what to believe, so fear filled the gaps. Valen sat by his window marking papers. He might never return. Outside, dogs howled at unseen shapes. The city's clock tower struck midnight, but its chime sounded dull, as if time itself hesitated to move forward. Just before dawn, a hush fell over the district. A strange glow lit the clouds beyond the eastern ridge, the exhaust of ships entering. Atmosphere. Valen stepped into the street, along with hundreds of neighbors, pajama strings fluttering in cool wind. Nobody spoke. They watched the sky paint itself with trembling points of blue light. Liar tugged Valen's sleeve and whispered, "They're coming." Valen placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, steady but gentle, though his own heart hammered. Like a drum in an empty hall. Surrender was no longer an idea read on a screen. It was engines roaring in the distance, drawing lines of fire across the morning sky. As the first rays of sunlight reached Sonor's tallest spires, Valen saw moisture on the cheeks of soldiers guarding the main road. Rain or tears, he could not tell. Sister Menza arrived, carrying no banner this time. She stood beside Valen, her voice quiet, "If we can't change the sky," she said, "we must learn to change ourselves." Valen nodded, unable to respond. He understood that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it is the silent decision to keep breathing when the world rewrites itself. The human ships were not yet visible, but their distant rumble grew louder, a slow drumbeat shaking loose every old certainty. Valen wondered if classrooms would still stand tomorrow, if children would still learn, if stories would still be told about ancient philosophies of peace. Perhaps new stories would be needed, stories about how to live after pride collapses, how to build bridges with former enemies, how to find music in the space between endings and beginnings. He did not know those stories yet, but he felt their first notes in the trembling air, waiting to be heard. Alien soul woke before dawn, long before the city's temple bells would normally chime, pulled from restless dreams by a deep vibration that rolled through the walls of her small apartment. She slipped to the balcony and drew her shawl tight. Against the chill, the eastern sky glowed faint orange, yet against that soft light marched hundreds of needle-sharp pinpricks, engines descending from orbit like a slow rain of silent meteors. Each tremor in the stone beneath her feet felt like a heartbeat that did not belong to her, as if the planet itself trembled at the alien's approach. Inside, Grandmother Sura sat at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched leaf tea cooling between her gnarled hands. She had once been a singer of epic tales, her voice strong enough to fill holes. Now she barely spoke. Alien knelt beside her and tried to force a smile. "They are almost here," she whispered. Sora's eyes, clouded by age yet still sharp with memory, flicked to the balcony. "I sang of heroes who never bent the knee," she said softly. "Songs do not stop bullets." The words carried no accusation, only a lifetime's weary wisdom. Throughout Solmir, alarms remained silent. The city's leaders had ordered calm. Still, people crowded rooftops and windows, drawn by dread and curiosity. Alien's neighbors gathered in the hallway, voices hushed. A mechanic from the ground floor swore he could already smell foreign fuel. A baker clutched an old family emblem to her chest. Every face shared the same question. What happens now that surrender is no longer theory, but metal and fire overhead? As the sun climbed, the first dropships cut through low clouds with long contrails that glimmered like molten silver. They settled on the highway that encircled the central districts, blocking all traffic. Jets of steam hissed where hot hulls met wet pavement. Alien leaned farther over the railing, sketchbook forgotten in her hand. She had painted bright murals on public walls during better seasons. Now she watched a canvas of fear unfurl under the new sky. Columns of armored vehicles rolled out, hovering a finger's width above the ground. Each tank looked big enough to carry a house, each troop carrier shaped like a dark scar upon the morning glow. Yet no weapons fired. No sirens wailed. Soldiers in reflective visors formed perfect lines, boots landing in unison like a single enormous drumbeat. Alien realized only then that she had been holding her breath since dawn, and the exhale came out shaky. "Grandmother." Sura touched her arm. "Watch closely," she said. "Truth hides in small moments." A sudden flutter of movement below drew their eyes. A child no more than 3 summers old, wearing a white dress that billowed like a sail, had slipped through a ground floor doorway. Her caretaker must have turned away for half a second, enough for tiny curiosity to escape. She toddled straight toward the nearest infantry line, arms spread for balance. Every rooftop watcher seemed to gasp at once, a shared intake of terror that vacuumed the street into silence. Alien felt her pulse hammer. Surely the soldier on point would lift his rifle, or the column would march on, unaware, crushing her beneath plated boots. Instead, the front-rank soldier broke formation. Metal joints hissed as he stepped forward and bent at the knees. The powered armor made him monstrous in size, but his movements were careful, almost gentle. He scooped the child into his arms, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. The white dress rippled once before settling across steel forearms. The soldier turned, scanned the crowd of frozen civilians, and located a frantic caretaker rushing from a doorway. Without a word, he carried the child back, crouched so the hand over happened at eye level, and then returned to his place in line. The column resumed its march, the pause lasting no more than 10 slow heartbeats. Yet the gesture echoed louder than any speech. Alien's knees weakened. She gripped the balcony rail. Around her, neighbors blinked at one another in stunned relief. Somewhere on another rooftop, someone began to sob softly, the sound mixing fear with something dangerously like hope. Grandmother Sura's voice quivered. "Did you see?" He held her, as if she were his own. Alien could only nod. Later that day, the city's loudspeakers crackled to life, but the message was not the thunder of conquest. A calm translator announced curfews for safety, locations for food distribution, and an open request for medical staff to report to makeshift clinics. Human and Narayan medics would work side by side. Every directive ended with the same phrase: cooperation ensures survival of all. Many citizens met the words with suspicion, yet none could deny the memory of the soldier's gentle hands. As dusk painted the skyline gold, Alien ventured down to street level. She carried a small bag of art supplies, charcoal sticks, chalks, folded canvas, uncertain why she had brought them. At a corner barricade, she found a group of locals trading rumors. Among them stood a tall figure draped in a traveler's cloak, hood hiding most of his face. When Alien approached, he lifted the hood just enough for her to see determined eyes. "We are organizing," he murmured, voice low. "Not to fight, too late for that, but to watch. To record every deed, good or evil, so no lie can rewrite. Today," he extended a data chip. "Will you help?" Alien hesitated. She had once dreamt of inspiring crowds with bright colors. Now truth itself needed defenders. She took the chip and slipped it into her pocket. Night deepened. Searchlights from patrolling drones crossed the clouds like lazy comets. Alien returned to her building and began sketching on a fresh sheet of canvas secured to the wall outside the entrance. Lines flowed under her fingers, no bold slogans, no flags. Only the simple scene she could not forget. An armored giant kneeling to lift a child. Neighbors halted to watch, some offering candles to light her work. Grandmother Sura hummed a quiet melody by her side, an old lullaby that once celebrated victory, but now sounded like a prayer for understanding. When Alien stepped back, she saw more than a drawing. She saw a seed of possibility rooted in common ground. One moment of mercy strong enough to split the old story in two. Overhead, a low engine hum reminded her that occupation was far from gentle freedom, and tomorrow could still bring sorrow. But tonight, a small crowd stood together, regarding an image that was neither propaganda nor protest, only a question asked in charcoal. If the enemy can show compassion, what can we choose to show in return? The city breathed that question into the cool air as stars emerged, each point of light a quiet promise that the unknown was no longer only to be feared, but also, perhaps, to be met. Ren Taller stood at the top of the silent spacelift tower, clutching a small case that carried the last official seal of Naraya. A shuttle waited on the pad, its engines humming like a giant metal heart. Gray dawn wrapped the city below in soft mist, hiding rubble and half-repaired streets. Ren's breath fogged the visor of his light suit as he stepped across the gangway. He felt the eyes of thousands on his back, some filled with hope, others with a suspicion so sharp it could cut steel. Today he would meet the human commanders. The thought felt unreal, like speaking with figures from a myth that had turned out to be living, breathing people, Inside the shuttle, every surface shone clean and unadorned. A single guard in pale armor nodded politely. No weapons were visible. Ren sat by a tiny window and watched Naraya shrink to a patchwork of green and gray. The climb was smooth, almost gentle, but his stomach twisted. 3 times on the ascent, he opened his case and checked the documents inside peace clauses, prisoner logs, a simple promise of rebuilding together. Each time he shut the lid more firmly, as if trapping doubt inside. The human flagship hung, in orbit like a dark mirror against the stars. Docking arms extended, guiding the shuttle into a cradle of soft lights. Ren expected corridors of iron and armed soldiers at every corner, but the reception hall was small and bright, decorated only with a wide circle of chairs. A sphere-shaped translator drone drifted forward, its surface flickering with soft amber. Text: "Welcome, Envoy Teller. Follow, please." Its voice sounded calm, almost musical. 2 doors slid apart, revealing a room that could have been a modest council chamber back home. A round table, glass pitchers of water, and a single large window showing the curve of Naraya below. Commander Yarrow rose from his seat. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a uniform the color of morning fog, he offered his hand. Ren hesitated, then shook it. Yarrow's grip was steady, but not crushing, simply human. "You traveled safely, I hope," Yarrow said. Ren gave a careful nod. He waited for speeches of dominance, for demands wrapped in polite words. None came. Instead, Yarrow gestured for him to sit. "We are here to keep every life we can," the commander began. "That is all." Ren set the seal on the table. "Your fleets tore our pride apart," he said, voice low but clear. "Why? Spare us now?" The translator drone, labeled Seer in small letters, relayed the words. Yarrow folded his hands. "Because we remember when pride blinded us too," he answered. "We did not come to rule over ashes. We want partners who understand the cost of mistakes." Ren felt a strange ache behind his ribs, a spark of agreement he had not expected. The doors opened again. A young girl entered, escorted by a medic. Her green tunic was patched at the elbows. Her eyes held the cautious light of someone who had seen too much too soon. Ren recognized her from reports. Mirren, orphaned when the outer colonies fell. She carried a small book with a hand-painted cover. The medic whispered, and Mirren offered the book to Ren. On the first page, she had drawn 2 hands, one human, one Norayan planting a seedling together. Beneath the picture, in shaky letters, she had written, "Please grow." Ren's vision blurred. He closed the book gently and met Yarrow's gaze. "Perhaps we can," he said. The talks moved quickly. After that, lines once filled with threats were crossed out, replaced by promises of shared hospitals, joint patrols, and cultural exchanges. Seer recorded every word, projecting translations on the wall in real time. When Ren and Yarrow finally pressed their thumbprints onto the treaty's final page, the drone chimed like distant wind chimes, announcing completion. There were no trumpets, no grand parade, just 2 people and a machine agreeing that tomorrow should not repeat yesterday. Hours later, Ren stepped onto Narayan soil again, but the planet felt different, as if history had bent ever so slightly during his absence. A gentle rain fell, and with it came new sights. Human engineers guiding power lines back to life alongside Narayan technicians. Med teams of mixed uniforms setting up clinics in the open squares. Children chasing rolling food cans across cracked pavement, giggling at accents they had never heard before. On a tall retaining wall near the river, an artist finished a mural, showing an armored figure kneeling to lift a child in a white dress. Ren recognized alien soul from the reports, the charcoal already smudging her fingers black. She stepped back, revealing the final stroke, a horizon filled not with warships, but with seedlings sprouting under twin suns. Wren walked the length of the mural. Citizens gathered, some still wary, others openly curious. A Norean boy asked, "A human medic, the name of a strange tool." The medic answered by letting him hold it. Laughter rose, a small, bright sound after so much silence. Wren realized that the city itself seemed to breathe again, not yet strong, but unmistakably alive. He turned toward the central plaza, where elders were setting up a makeshift stage. They asked him to speak, but words felt heavy. Instead, he opened Mirren's book and held it high for all to see. Faces lifted, some tear-streaked, some skeptical, but all watching. "The future starts with simple acts," Wren said at last, voice clear over the soft patter of rain. One seed, one hand offered, one truth told without fear. He closed the book and looked toward the sky. High above, human and Norean supply craft crossed paths like weaving threads. For the first time in many cycles, the engines did not rattle his nerves. They sounded like hammers striking iron for a shared home yet to be built. That night, in a quiet office lit by a single lamp, Wren wrote in the new journal issued to every diplomat of the post-war council. His first entry contained only one sentence: "Silence can be broken by voices that choose to speak softly." He set down the pen, listening to distant construction drones and the faint echo of children practicing songs for a joint festival. No one had dared imagine a week before. The war had ended in defeat, yet something larger had begun, an experiment in mercy, in patience, in surviving together. Wren Towler closed his eyes, not to escape the noise, but to let it settle into a rhythm he could carry forward, the gentle murmur of a planet learning to live beyond the silence.